The summer sun streamed through the dusty windows of the old farmhouse, casting long golden shadows across the wooden floor. It had been years since anyone had truly lived there. The once vibrant garden, filled with their mother's flowers, had long since grown wild, weeds choking out the last remnants of what used to be a place of beauty and life. The house itself, once the heart of their childhood, now felt like a forgotten relic of a time neither sibling was sure had ever existed. Sophie stood in the doorway of the house, her fingers lightly touching the peeling paint on the frame. She hadn't been back here in nearly a decade, not since the fight with her brother, William. She had avoided this place, this house, and all the memories it carried with it. But today, standing in the house she once called home, she couldn't avoid the flood of emotions that hit her. Memories of their childhood came rushing back. Memories of her and William running through the fields, chasing each other until they collapsed in the tall grass, laughing until their sides ached. They had been so close then, inseparable, bound by the kind of love and trust that only siblings could share. But everything had changed after their parents died. Everything had changed because of the fortune. Their parents hadn't been wealthy, not by any means, but they had worked hard, saved what they could, and built a comfortable life for their children. When they passed, they had left behind the old farmhouse, the family's land, and a modest sum of money. It wasn't much, but it was enough to provide a safety net for Sophie and William as they navigated adulthood. At least it should have been. Sophie had always been the responsible one, careful with money and diligent about planning for the future. William, on the other hand, was the dreamer. He was always chasing the next big idea, always convinced that success was just around the corner, even when it wasn't. He had a heart full of ambition but often lacked the patience to see things through. Their parents had always worried about that, but Sophie had always believed in her brother. She had trusted him, right up until the day he betrayed her. It had all started shortly after their parents' death, when William came to her with a plan. He had found an investment opportunity, a chance to double, maybe even triple the inheritance their parents had left behind. It was risky, but the payout could change their lives forever. At first, Sophie was hesitant. She didn't like the idea of gambling with the money their parents had worked so hard to save. But William was persuasive. He painted a picture of a bright future, one where they wouldn't have to worry about money ever again. "I know it's a risk," William had said, his voice full of that familiar excitement. "But trust me, sophomore, this could be it. This could be our chance to turn things around, to build something even better than what Mom and Dad left us." Sophie had hesitated, but in the end, she had agreed. She trusted her brother, and she wanted to believe in his dreams, even if they scared her. They had pooled the inheritance together, every penny of it, and William had gone ahead with the investment. For weeks, they waited, hoping that William's big gamble would pay off. But it hadn't. The investment fell through. Not just a little, but catastrophically. The company William had put their money into had gone under, and with it, their entire inheritance disappeared. Sophie was devastated, but more than that, she was furious. She had trusted William, and he had gambled away everything their parents had left them. What was worse was that William didn't seem to fully grasp the gravity of what he had done. He apologized, but it was hollow, and he quickly moved on to the next big idea, convinced that he could fix it, that he could find another way to bring back the lost fortune. But Sophie was done. She couldn't take it anymore. The promises, the dreams, the endless cycle of failure. The betrayal cut deep, and their relationship, once so strong, shattered. They fought bitterly, words of anger and blame echoing through the halls of the farmhouse, until Sophie couldn't take it anymore. She packed her bags, left the house, and never looked back. That had been 10 years ago. Now, standing in the farmhouse once again, Sophie felt the weight of those lost years pressing down on her. She had built a life for herself since then. Moved to the city, started a career, made new friends, but she had never been able to shake the pain of what had happened with William. Every once in a while, she would hear news of him, usually through mutual friends or distant relatives, but they hadn't spoken since the day she walked out of his life. That was until a week ago, when a letter from William had arrived at her door. It was brief, written in a shaky hand that Sophie barely recognized. In the letter, William had asked her to come back to the farmhouse, to talk, to hear him out. There was something he needed to tell her, something important. He had written that it might be his last chance to make things right. Sophie had nearly torn the letter up when she first read it. She had no desire to reopen old wounds, to relive the pain of that betrayal. But something about the tone of the letter had struck her. William had always been so full of energy, so full of life and dreams, but this letter had felt different. It had felt like a plea, like a man reaching out from the edge of a cliff. And so, here she was, standing in the farmhouse that held all their childhood memories, waiting for her brother. She heard the sound of footsteps behind her, and she turned to see William standing in the doorway. He looked older than she remembered, much older. His face was thinner, his eyes sunken, and there was a tiredness in his posture that she had never seen before. He smiled weakly when he saw her, but it was a sad smile, full of regret and sorrow. "Hey, Soph," he said quietly, stepping into the room. "Thanks for coming." Sophie didn't know what to say. She had imagined this moment so many times over the years, but now that it was happening, she felt a strange mix of anger and sadness bubbling up inside her. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to tell him that it was too late for apologies, but another part of her felt the old bond they had shared tugging at her heart. "You said you had something to tell me," she said, her voice stiff. William nodded and gestured to the old couch in the corner of the room. "Can we sit?" Reluctantly, Sophie followed him to the couch and sat down, keeping her distance. William took a deep breath and leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I don't know where to start," he began, his voice shaky, "but I guess I need to tell you the truth about what happened with the money, with the inheritance." Sophie stiffened. She had heard the story before. She knew what had happened. He had gambled away their parents' legacy, and they had paid the price. "It's too late, William," she said, cutting him off. "We've been over this. You lost the money. You made the choice. There's nothing more to say." William shook his head, his eyes filled with pain. "No, sophomore. You don't understand. It wasn't just a bad investment. It wasn't just me being stupid and reckless. There's more to it." Sophie frowned. "What are you talking about?" William sighed and leaned back against the couch, staring up at the ceiling as if searching for the right words. "The investment, it was a scam. I knew it was a scam." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "What do you mean, you knew?" "I didn't find out until after I had already put the money in," William said, his voice filled with guilt. "I found out that the people I was dealing with weren't who they said they were. They were con artists. But instead of telling you the truth, instead of trying to pull out, I doubled down. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it right before you ever found out." Sophie stared at him, her mind racing. You knew it was a scam? And you didn't tell me?" William nodded miserably. "I was scared, sophomore. I was ashamed. I didn't want you to know how badly I had messed up. I thought if I could just find a way to get the money back, you'd never have to know. But the deeper I got, the worse it became. And before I knew it, everything was gone. All of it." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. The betrayal she had felt all those years ago came rushing back, sharper and more painful than ever. He had lied to her, kept her in the dark while he gambled with their future, their parents' legacy. "How could you do that to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with hurt. Tears filled William's eyes as he reached out to her, his hand shaking. "I was stupid, sophomore. I was so stupid. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it right, but I just made everything worse. And I've spent every day since then hating myself for it." Sophie felt a lump rise in her throat as she looked at him. This wasn't the brother she remembered. The William who sat before her now. The William who sat before her now was broken, consumed by guilt and regret in a way she had never imagined. She wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the bitterness that had fueled her for so long. But seeing him like this, seeing him so vulnerable, it was harder than she thought. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Sophie whispered, tears welling up in her own eyes. William nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I understand. I just needed you to know the truth before it's too late." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock in the corner, each tick echoing through the room like the heartbeat of a life they had lost. Finally, Sophie took a deep breath and stood up, looking down at her brother. "I need time, William, but maybe we can try to find a way back." William looked up at her, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I'd like that," he said softly. As Sophie turned to leave the farmhouse, she knew it wouldn't be easy, but perhaps, just maybe, they could begin to heal the wounds of the past.